Welcome to the Unstuck and Unstoppable podcast, where we help you move your life forward. If you have ever felt like you're in a rut or that you are sabotaging your life in some area of your life, you're listening to the right episode of our podcast today. I'm your host, Jimnkyles, and I'm here with Jolea Garza.
Yes, this is going to be good.
Yeah, so
excited.
Good. We're so delighted to have you with us. I know many of you are watching on our YouTube channel. We're glad to have you watching the podcast, and many of you are listening through iTunes and whatever media outlet that you consume your content. We're just so grateful to have you a part of the podcast. We want to help you move your life forward.
Yeah.
Hopefully you've been enjoying the podcast. I do want to give a shout out to Kevin Moore back here, Mr. Technical Director, running all things tech. I'm so grateful for you. He makes this podcast happen each and every week.
Yep.
And so we're so grateful for the behind the scenes team that he has to make that happen. Hey, well, we have been in this last couple of weeks talking about the 4 essential building blocks of life.
Yeah. How do we avoid the biggest regrets in life? And so we have spent so much time just diving into identity and purpose and vision. And now we're finally at paradigms.
That's right.
Yeah.
Today's going to be paradigms. And so for those of you that are brand new to the podcast, we first want to welcome you. Thank you. This content has been coming out of my book that is going to be released November 15th. You go to the website, jimnkyles.com, and you can pre-order a copy now, or by the time you're listening, you'll probably be able to order your copy and get it shipped out to you directly. Super excited about it. Yeah. What we're doing here is we're just giving nuggets that will help you as you're listening to the podcast, really move your life forward. If you want to dive deeper, I do want to encourage you, get the book.
Absolutely.
Also, go to our website. We got tons of great ebook downloads that we are trying to make available to you just to help you. Our goal and mission in life, I am so passionate, and I know Jolea feels the same way. We just want to help you move forward. So many people, in fact, I started to write the book and was doing research, and it said up to 80% of Americans feel stuck right now. 80%. And I'm a pastor, and so my passion in life comes from helping people become who God created them to be. And that is all that this podcast has been, geared to do, is give you 25 minutes of, hey, what can I do right now to get unstuck? And then if you want to dive deeper, which it's going to take you diving deeper,
Absolutely.
You're going to have to go and download some of the resources. Be a part of our community. We have our
we have a Facebook community where we're in there. We connect with people. We're seeing great stories of life change happening there. And I was actually even thinking over the last few weeks, just how long this journey, how this journey has impacted me, So being a part of this as you were writing the book, and we were all, there was a group of us that got to be guinea pigs of the Unstuck and Unstoppable journey. And I was like, man, really, truly my life is forever changed because of the process. And so I just love all of the content. I say that to say, you talk about all the different content. So you have the book and the podcast and the Facebook group and community, but all of it are such great additions and tools and resources for the journey. And I believe my life has truly been changed by it. And I know that other people's lives are going to be changed by this as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we recorded the Audible version of the book. So those of you that are like, I don't want to read it, but I listened to it, that'll come out in November as well. And we literally read word for word all 242 pages. I think it's 52,000 words. And I was reading, I went back home. It took us 5 days. And I went back home to Phyllis and said, wow, that's really good. I needed it.
That's great.
Because I just...
The book that keeps on giving.
That's right. Well, my brother calls it an evergreen book. And what I want you to know is we're not sitting here claiming we don't get stuck or have never been stuck. And even in the book, I make it very clear that I'm going to be very transparent, and I am.
Yep.
And I think the part that I want people to realize is it's not a one and done.
Right.
It's
never.
Oh man, I'm stuck here again. Okay, what do I have to do? The good thing is that you now have tools in your tool belt.
Absolutely.
And that's what we want to do, is give you tools so that when you feel your life getting stuck, maybe it's in the area of your identity or purpose or vision or paradigm, which we'll talk a little bit more about today, then you've got tools to say, okay, I feel stuck. I know what stuck feels like, but I'm not stranded.
Right.
And if I'll do a little bit of work, because that is the key.
Yep,
like
just
you can know what to do, but not do what you know.
Right.
And you got to do what you know. And then what's going to happen is you'll be able to self-diagnose and then just keep your life moving forward.
Yeah.
And so I do want you to know we're excited to be on the journey with you. Today, we're going to be talking about paradigms, the power of paradigms.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I'm sure somebody's listening to this podcast and you're like, we've talked about paradigms before. Right. And then maybe some of you are new to the podcast and you're just now listening. We do have a couple of other podcast episodes that have covered this. And so, Pastor Jim, I know you have a couple of different directions that you're going.
Yeah. Well, today will be brand new content. But episode number 2, we talked a little bit and introduced paradigms, dry rot, and blowouts. Mm-hmm. Then episode 4 and 5, we
sabotage
really talked about sabotage, the paradigms that are subconscious, that are sabotaging your life. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to recover that content. Today what we're going to do is we're going to cover new content.
Right.
Again, the book has so many facets and layers. We could talk about it almost for week on end, just keep on. But I thought today, I wanted you to hear a quote that I think encapsulates where a lot of people find themselves. People live trapped in a cage of their own making, and they're often simply unaware of it.
Wow.
So think about that. Just let that, like I'm trapped in a cage, but many people think it's a cage someone else made. Right. Because we blame.
Yes.
It's easier to blame than take responsibility.
I wouldn't be here if it weren't
If it weren't for you. And I'm a victim. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to help people see is there are no victims. If there was ever a victim, you could say the Apostle Paul was a victim. And never once did he ever claim that card and say, I'm a victim. He's like, no, I'm a victor.
I take responsibility.
And what is it that I need to do regardless of the bad things that have happened? And we talked a little bit about that. Yep. And so today I want us to just diagnose, maybe we're living in a cage that we made and we're simply unaware of it.
That's great.
And so we have to realize that I think we do live in cages, and here's why, because we live in a fallen world.
Yep.
So we're believers and Christians, and many of our listeners are, and people that watch on YouTube. But that means that sin entered the heart of humanity. So no matter what kind of a good family upbringing you have, there's still going to be sin and mistakes and
imperfections.
Brokenness. So I used to say, oh, they're, growing up in my immaturity, I'd be like, oh, they're dysfunctional. And what I realized is I'm dysfunctional. My dysfunction has become normal.
Yes, that's so good. It's so good.
Just because I'm okay with it doesn't mean it's healthy. And so everybody has a level of dysfunction. And here's what we know about paradigms too. Paradigms are formed by the thoughts that come into our mind that we believe.
Wow.
And so, I talk about several stories, but, I'll give an example, and we talked a little bit about it before, but for those that are jumping in, my dad worked a lot growing up. We owned restaurants, and so we did a baseball game. I was an athletic young person, and I was first baseman, and I batted fourth, so that's where the cleanup, so they call me the cleanup guy. And so we'd typically hit the ball really well, and this one game my dad said he was coming to, and lo and behold, I hit a home run, and I'm looking around, he's not there. 2 thoughts came into my mind that formed my paradigm moving forward. One was, you're a great athlete.
Wow.
I'll never forget thinking, because I'd hit several home runs, but for whatever reason, this was a grand slam. And I'm like, I'm a good athlete. And I've always believed I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
The second thing was that your dad doesn't really care.
Wow.
And so you're not important enough for him to show up. And so from that time on, I always struggled with the value of my life as a person. Like if my dad wouldn't show up, if he's not there, then why would anybody else?
Yep, that's so good.
And we know as an adult, that's so silly. My dad is such a loving man. He was such a kind and gentle man. He just had responsibilities.
Right.
And he was the manager of a restaurant at that time. And so he didn't even have flexibility with his schedule. It's you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
But the point of that is those thoughts came into my mind. So a thought by itself, doesn't have any power. So if you're listening there, think about the power of a thought or the words that someone speak over your life depend on the place that person has in your life. If a total stranger said, you're ugly, you're dumb, you're stupid, you're going to blow them off. You're like, whatever, you're an idiot.
But let a family member.
Someone who's close. Or in a moment where something mattered. And it's like then someone close, a girlfriend or a father, or a brother, a sibling. I talk about, my older brother calling me fat in the book. And you'll have to read that story. And the lie that I believed, and even as a healthy teenager, still fought this self-image saying that I was fat.
Wow.
See, it wasn't a weight problem, it was a self-image problem. But again, it's the thought
Planted
that came
by
into my
one. Yep.
mind. And then I believed it. Well, once you believe it, now it's sown into your heart.
Wow.
And we call it the subconscious.
So it sounds like it's the believed
Believed
thoughts.
thought.
Yep.
Whether true or a lie.
So good.
And that's what's the most powerful, because I think a lot of us have trauma from a lie that we believe, not the reality of the situation. And so that's where you have to realize too, we live in a fallen world, and the devil is trying to steal, kill, and to destroy our lives. And so something could have happened and nothing bad actually happened, but your thought of that event, just like with my dad.
Right.
You know, of course he came back later and said, well, I'm so sorry I had to work. But at the time it was just too little too late.
Right. Exactly.
So that situation wasn't the truth, but the lie that was believed created this paradigm. And I struggled, most of my teenage and young adult life with that.
And maybe you can speak more to this, but even as we're discussing this, the reason why I think we talk so much about paradigms, why, there's so much in your book about paradigms, is because the truth is, there are good paradigms.
That's right.
And there are bad paradigms.
That's right.
And if we look at our lives, our life is defined a lot by great paradigms. The way you were raised and the decisions that you made. If you went to college because there was a paradigm that told you college is important, a good education is important. And so you make decisions based off of that. And so that's why we focus on the bad paradigms, because just as much as the good ones define your life, the bad ones also can 100%. Define your life.
Well, and here's the thing that you have to realize. The thing that I really love about paradigms is the fact that no matter where you are with the paradigm you have, you can always change it. And once you change it, you really can direct your life, because paradigms happen subconsciously.
Right.
The paradigm is the subconscious thought, the subconscious programming that runs in the background of your life. Well, up to 95% of your life is ran through the subconscious. So most of us are living, in one study, up to 90 some odd percent of people are living life on autopilot. So you probably didn't even think about how you drove to work and what street you took. You started checking out. You got in the car. Why? Because you drive that way every time. You don't think about breathing. You don't think about all the little things that you do in your life throughout the day. And so what we've done is we create these neural pathways. And the neural pathway, when you first do something, say something,
that's great.
It's almost like running on a dirt road. It's like say you're out in a field and you've got this open grass. Well, the first time you may make a track.
Right. But you have to intentionally do it.
Well, you do it intentionally. You're blazing a trail. Well, the second time you think that thought, do that action.
That's great.
That path becomes more worn and more worn and more. And so then now that path turns into a trail, and then you do it enough. Now it becomes a highway.
Wow.
And so you create this massive infrastructure in your life, which is awesome when you have good habits, right? Like I wake up at 5:30 every morning. You got your quiet times.
Becomes easier and
it's easier. I'm working out.
Right.
I've got a schedule, and it's so they say 30 days is really what it takes to change the way you behave and live. The first 10 days are just absolutely painful.
And
the second 10 days stretch is tolerating. You could tolerate it. It's not painful. I can tolerate it. It's okay. But then it's really the last 10 days where you start to begin to find joy and fulfillment. And so that's where you begin to build this highway, whether good or bad.
That's great.
And some of us are comfortable, become normal in our dysfunction, and you don't even realize it. But if you were to take a step back, you'd be like, wow, that's really not healthy. I'm coping, or I'm just triggered, and so I'm just reacting everywhere. And so there was a great video. I'm going to read a little bit of the video of Elevation Church put it out. I put in my book. I think it's page 190 in the book, but it's called The Human Brain, and I thought it illustrates in a powerful way what I'm talking about. So I'm going to read some of it out, but listen to this. The human brain is made of approximately 100 billion, with a B, neurons. That's approximately the number of stars that exist within our galaxy.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? That's how many neurons are firing in our human brain.
At all times.
With over 5 trillion chemical operations occurring every second.
Wow.
And signals being transferred at the speed of over 260 miles per hour. Our brain is rapidly analyzing and responds to all the sights, sounds, and smells around us.
Wow.
Can you imagine how complex God made us?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's absolutely amazing. And the challenge with that, though, again, is that we were born as sinners and slaves to sin. And so our minds have been programmed to behave out of a selfish desire. And so the way we think and dream and reason and act are limited to the ways of the world, the ways that we're just taught, whether good or bad, right or wrong. And for us to change that, we have to create new neurological pathways.
Wow.
And that's the thing that really this whole paradigm concept is. I'm going to create a new neurological pathway. And I'm going to create new behaviors, new actions, new thoughts, new words. And it's really creating this from a dirt road to a highway. Now, what we have to understand, though, is to build a new highway, you have to tear down the old highway.
Come on, that's so good.
And that's where the subconscious, what you've got to look at, and here's how I would diagnose it. What area in my life do I see repeated often?
Patterns.
It's a pattern that I want to change. So let me say, so maybe you're bouncing from one relationship to another relationship.
One job to another
One job to another job.
Yeah.
Maybe your finances, you get ahead, but you always find yourself in debt. You're drowning. Maybe it's physical, where you lose a little bit of weight. You gain it back. It's just this seesaw of weight loss, weight gain. Those are areas where I would say there is a subconscious sabotage happening.
Wow, that's so good. Yeah.
Because if you weren't sabotaging yourself, you would be able to be consistent and keep moving
make
forward.
Progress.
And you'll notice it's not typically all of your life.
Right.
It's usually one or two areas.
Yeah.
And some of it is all. But what you've got to do now is you've got to go back and you've got to say, I'm going to destroy and tear down the old subconscious pattern of thought.
Okay.
And so what we do, I always first say, let's recognize that area. So first what you want to do is recognize the area. So let's say, what you want to pick one?
Let's do finances.
Finances, okay. So let's say finances. You get a bonus, you make more money, but you find yourself constantly spending more than you make.
Back to paycheck to
poverty,
paycheck,
here's the fallacy. People think poverty is the condition of your income. It's really a fallacy. It's poverty is a mentality.
Yep.
So you can make six figures, you can make seven figures, and still have a poverty mentality.
Yep. Wow.
And it comes from lack. So a lot of times you'll grow up in a scarce environment where there wasn't a whole lot of things provided. And so you start to say, well, it's not enough. Or the flip could be is that you just never learn self-control. And so there's this insatiable, I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled.
Yep.
And you've got to go spend more.
Yep.
So you can kind of find yourself in different areas.
Yep.
And so what you got to do then is say, when was whatever emotion that I'm feeling? So let's say, man, I'm broke. I feel like,
wow.
So when was the first time I felt like I didn't have enough?
Wow.
And you got to really tap into the emotional part of, because here's what happens. And I hope you're capturing this, but
that's great.
The subconscious has no age.
Yep. That's so great.
So when we see someone who gets triggered through trauma triggers, or we see a sabotage, it's an inner child that's presenting itself in present day reality.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that we have to go all the way back.
You got to go back.
So wherever we're finding a pattern in our life today, go as far back
whatever
as you can.
Emotion that you can get to the root of why you did what you did. So here would be one too, like relationships. Say you bounce from one relationship to the next relationship, and you find yourself 3 months in, I'm dating someone, and then I find myself sabotaging it. Well, that could have been you were abandoned as a child.
Right.
And so you feel like you had someone that you loved, might have been a friend, a parent, a brother, sister, and you were super close, and somehow they abandoned you, and you subconsciously made a decision, I'm never going to get that close to anyone.
Never going to allow somebody to do
so
that
once
to me
you
again.
get past the threshold of that relationship, and you get to the place where you made that decision as a child, you'll start to sabotage it because subconsciously you're going to make sure you protect yourself. I'm going to protect myself. And so then you'll do something stupid. You'll say something. You'll start to push them away, and you don't even know why.
Wow.
Well, it's the emotion of that child at 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 15 that had the relationship of the person that abandoned them, left them, and you made sometimes an inner vow, I'll never
do that again.
I'm
allow
not going
that
to
again.
allow that to get. I don't trust men. I'll never trust men. I'll never trust women. And so you just got to go back to, okay, I felt that, man. And sometimes that's the hardest part of the whole thing is being very open and honest
Right.
and candid and saying, when did I feel that? And the truth is, you got to unplug. You got to get to a silent place, a quiet place, turn your phone off. And it's going to take a little bit of work.
Yeah.
And then, so maybe it's a 6-year-old. My dad left. I was 6 years old. Well, if you don't fix that 6-year-old child is the one that shows up in present day reality.
Right. So my question is, once you've figured out maybe where that's come from, and I know that's a much longer process. That's what we say. This is a journey.
Yeah.
But so once you've identified that, then what did you, in your journey, in your process, then what do you do next? How do you get
Well, I'm still doing
moment?
it. You know, it's really funny. I'm about up into my teenage years now.
That's great.
I've been in therapy now for about
great.
8-9 years, and I say therapist. I have a life coach, and we still process to this day. He'll be like, "When's the first time you felt that?" We'll still go through it, but here's what you do: you got to then identify the lie. What was the lie that was present and I believed in that moment? Well, so for me, my dad, I'm not valuable enough for my dad to show up.
Yeah.
And here's the lie: if my dad won't show up,
Who else?
who else will?
Yeah.
So I remember when I first got married to Phyllis, I sabotaged our marriage the first year or two of our marriage. We almost divorced. I mean, there's a whole, we've given our story and testimony. But part of that was me, because I had to deal with what I later would recognize, the sabotage of that relationship. Because if my dad wasn't good enough, how is the woman of my dreams going to be good enough?
Wow.
And that was a tough 3 years of marriage, the first 3 years of us figuring that out.
That's a great example.
But, know, and that's where maybe you're listening and you've gone from one divorce to another. It applies again to every area. So what's the lie? And then you've got to replace it with the truth. And so remember, deconstructing the highway. If it's a path, it's no big deal. But once it's a highway, you got to constantly go back when you feel that emotion.
Right.
And you get escalated, or that inner child tries to sabotage again. You got to go back and say, no, here's the lie that I believed back then.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. It's not true.
Yeah.
I am worthy. I am worth love.
That's
being
good.
loved. People do love me. My dad did love me.
Yeah.
And so then you replace that lie with the truth, and you're building a new neural highway.
Got it. That's great.
And so you have, but it takes you declaring it, confessing it.
And you're bringing your subconscious
believing
thought into the conscious mind
100%.
And having to actively combat it.
And just acknowledging it is
Right.
half the battle.
Right.
But there's many times I'd have to say, my dad does love me. My dad did love me. Phyllis does love me. Because remember, the goal is not to just deconstruct a highway. The goal is to build a new neural pathway, a new neural
different one.
highway. Yeah. And that's where the subconscious, it is tricky. In fact, when I began to write the book, and you know this, I thought the whole book was going to be about the subconscious because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it.
Yep. And how it impacts your life.
But the subconscious, unconscious part of our lives is such a huge, it's like the iceberg underwater. You see the top of the iceberg above the water.
There's so
but
much
so
more going
much
on
more is
underneath.
going on underneath. And it is such an interesting thing that if you're not aware of this and start to diagnose and acknowledge the areas where you're being sabotaged, this is why this one to me is so important, because you can learn your identity, who you are in Christ. You can know what you're supposed to be doing, what God's assignment is for me today, and I can know where I'm going, which is the vision God has for my life and my marriage, all those other areas,
and still
not get there.
Wow. Yeah.
And still be stuck.
Still stuck. Still
and
sabotage
that's even more
everything.
frustrating, right? And I think that's where Christianity gets frustrating. Because you come to church and you hear people talk about identity and purpose and vision, but you've done all those things and you recognize, dadgummit, there is something deeper that I am stuck and I don't know why.
And I've seen it, because we're a part of helping lead this church too. You see it all the time where people have engaged and they're so excited and they're like, I've uncovered my purpose and I want to be a part and I'm going all in and I want to have that. But then I see it so many times where somebody goes all in and then all of a sudden they're gone. And I will go and ask them, well, what happened? And they've got caught up with their finances or with their marriage, and because they're back in a cycle that they never broke.
They didn't break the cycle. And that's why I think spirituality also has to have the duality of not only spiritual, but the psychological. And that's one of the things I tried to do in the book. I had a theologian help me, but I also had a psychiatrist.
Right, that's so good.
Randy was up there helping me, making sure, because the Bible, we talk about the heart of a man, But psychology talks about the subconscious.
Right.
And so you can get it a little bit where, man, God, I'm dealing with my heart. Yeah, but your heart is the subconscious paradigm. It's the pattern of thought. Right. It's the way you've allowed yourself to program your life.
Yep.
And we've got to address both, because otherwise God will change you, transform you, and you'll come out of the world for a little while, but then you'll go right back in and you get stuck in those old cycles.
So to move forward, we got to break those paradigms. I love that scripture, the Romans 12:2. So you say, don't conform. It says, don't copy the behaviors, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Yeah.
It's your thoughts, I'm telling you. And, and then you're going to learn what God wants for your life. And all of that happens because, think about this, if you didn't change the way you think and your thoughts, even if God speaks to you, you don't understand it, or it doesn't align with your old pattern. That's why you got to deconstruct it. And I just want to encourage you. We've got some great resources on the website. I hope this has helped you. And I also want to go back and listen to episode 2, 4, and 5. Because in those episodes, we're going to talk about how subconscious paradigms are formed. And so that's really, really powerful. And then we talk more about paradigms and the filter of your life, how that your life is framed and filtered, and it's through the paradigm. So go back and listen to those. Well,
why don't you just give us, just kind of put a bow on it, the 4 things to do to really just help reprogram those paradigms.
I think you got to, again, let's just diagnose the area where you seem to have a pattern that's negative, you know, not one that you're getting results that you don't want. Then you've got to expose the lie. So you got to feel the emotion of when you sabotage. What emotion are you feeling? That's good. And guys, listen, I get it. You're like, I'm not emotional. I wasn't either. In fact, I have a whole section in the book called "This Chapter's a Note for Men," because I'm the most, I don't cry. I probably cried 5 times, as many fingers on my hand. I don't cry. I'm not emotional, very even keeled. But what I realized was, if you don't allow yourself to experience the low lows of disappointments in life, you can't experience the high highs of joy.
That's great.
God was really speaking to me about that. And so, but that emotion gives you a trigger point where I can go back to. Because again, remember, what's coming up is your inner child in that moment.
So good.
So when's the first time I felt the emotion? And then you want to expose the lie that you believe. So being, okay, well, here's what I believe. Everybody will abandon me. I'll always be broke. There'll never be enough. That's a lie. It's an absolute lie. And see, as a child, it's not fair, because to you at that time, it is true. But as an adult, it's an absolute lie. Because I get to have my own actions and behaviors. Even if I was in a dysfunctional or abusive home, I'm now an adult. I can change those things. So expose the lie, but then you've got to replace the lie. And I would say not just with truth, but God's truth.
So good.
It's really important. Get God's word in that area. God, I am loved. I am cherished. I'm valued. And then I would say this, write it down. So I can read it.
Come on.
But then you got to declare it.
That's good.
So, in some churches you say your confessions, your daily confessions. In the world we'd say your declarations. Just as you would stand up and say, I'm successful. The world's tapped into it. Because what are you doing? When you look in the mirror, God's word is true, whether you're applying it secularly or in a biblical context. And what they're doing, they're declaring, I'm successful. I'm smart. They're creating new neural pathways and new neural paths for their life.
So get your note cards, sticky notes.
I write
them
on
your
mirror.
Phone.
I actually have my mirror at the house. I've got my purpose statement, my identity statement. And I say it every day. I am a general. And then I say the other 7 sentences.
I have mine in my phone notes app, and I just say it in the car.
And then here's what I would say. Keep speaking it until you believe it.
That's great.
Don't stop until you believe it, because it'll take about 30 days. I remember when I began to declare my purpose statement, and I have several identity statements, and it just takes time. And then you'll begin to believe it, and then what are you doing? You rebuilt the new highway, and you'll begin to see your life move forward and not be stuck. So
that's good.
I hope that helps.
That's awesome. Well, some next steps and how we can continue to connect and move forward.
We want you to subscribe to wherever you're consuming the content. Just hit that subscribe button. We'd love to deliver this to you each and every week.
Teach somebody what you learned on this podcast. We love somebody posted on Facebook, just something that they learned. So they taught a lot of people, but just one person, one takeaway.
Powerful. And then engage engage, if you'd engage in our online community, Facebook, social media, we'd love to hear from you and just start following you and connecting with you.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
Post a review. We have so many reviews.
Yeah.
We're so grateful for those that have already posted. But if you are listening and love this podcast, let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and then we'd love for you to share the podcast just with one person. You know, if you're thinking today, man, someone needs to hear this, super easy. If you'll just take a moment, share it with them. Let's help them get unstuck and come on the journey of life with them. And so, hey, next week, we've got a bonus episode.
Yes.
And so we're super excited. I talked about moral margin. And so excited to have that as a bonus episode. Then we're going to come back and we're going to do some podcasts on leadership.
Yes.
And so I'm really excited about that. So keep tuning in and joining us. We're so thrilled to have you with us. Keep moving your life forward. Until next time.
Bye.